Today we are talking about the Aligner AI interview with Zara.
A lot of applicants want to know what kinds of questions they may get and how to answer clearly.
The goal is not to memorize perfect answers. It is to show your experience, your skills, and how you think.
Right, and honestly, that's actually where most people just freeze up.
Oh, totally, because we're so trained to just recite our resumes.
Exactly. And the moment a platform asks you to, evaluate two identical-looking lines of code and explain why one is better, panic sets in. It can feel incredibly unnatural to explain your thought process out loud to a screen.
Yeah, your brain might be saying, well, obviously option A is better than B, but you have to force yourself to vocalize the actual mechanics of that decision.
That is exactly the hurdle. It's a completely different muscle than a standard conversational interview.
For sure.
When you sit down for this process, the focus usually centers heavily on demonstrating real, practical experience and role-specific skills. But it goes way beyond just knowing your field.
Right. They want to see how you communicate.
Yes. The platform may look for crystal clear communication because, think about it. If you can't explain a complex concept simply, your underlying expertise doesn't really shine through in a useful way.
Right, because the end goal of this work is training models to be helpful to users.
Exactly.
If your explanation is convoluted, it just defeats the purpose.
So we're talking about clear communication, but I imagine attention to detail and the ability to follow instructions are also massive factors here.
Oh, absolutely. Instruction following is often a primary trait they evaluate.
Because you could have brilliant ideas, but if you don't follow the specific parameters of a prompt, that can be a major issue, right?
Yeah, if the prompt says, explain this in 3 bullet points using a professional tone, and you write a fantastic, informal 4-paragraph essay.
You failed the core task.
You failed it. Following constraints is just as important as the factual accuracy of your answer.
And the other big piece of the puzzle is explaining your reasoning. We just touched on this, but let's really break down the mechanism of why that matters.
It's usually not enough to just give a final answer. You often need to show the logical steps that got you there.
Exactly. If you just say, option A is correct, that doesn't prove you actually know the material.
You might have just flipped the coin.
Right. You might have just guessed. When you explain the why, you're proving that your methodology is sound. You're showing your work, like in high school math.
Okay, so with those traits in mind, clear communication, attention to detail, strict instruction following, and logical reasoning, what kind of questions might actually pop up to test those things?
Well, applicants may encounter a few different types of inquiries. First, there are usually some background questions.
Like basic resume stuff.
Sort of. These might simply ask you to walk through your past work or explain how your previous experience relates to the domain you're applying for. Then, you may get role-specific inquiries that really test your working knowledge in your particular field.
Let's slow down and unpack some of the terminology around the other question types, because I think it can sound a bit intimidating.
Yeah, fair enough.
For instance, people often hear they can expect AI response evaluation scenarios. When we say that, we don't mean judging an AI's feelings or doing some highly technical programming task.
No, not at all.
We just mean looking at 2 paragraphs or code blocks generated by a model and catching the fact that, say, one of them hallucinated a completely fake historical date or used the wrong formula.
That's a perfect clarification. It's about spotting the subtle differences and errors.
Right.
Aside from that, there can also be instruction following tests where you're given a very specific set of rules to apply to a problem. And you might see work style questions designed to see how you approach problems in a professional setting.
To make that a bit more concrete, what would one of those actually sound like?
You might hear something like, describe a time you applied your domain expertise to solve a difficult problem.
Okay.
Or maybe, how do you handle ambiguous guidelines when working on a new project?
And we should explicitly state right here, these are just general examples to help you prepare. We definitely do not claim these are exact questions you will receive. The actual questions may vary widely depending on the specific role you are applying for.
Always. The exact content will usually be tailored to your domain. But now that we have a sense of what may be asked, let's talk about how to construct a really great answer.
Because knowing the material is only half the battle.
Delivering it effectively under pressure is the real challenge.
Delivery is everything. When you're staring at the camera and the timer is ticking, it's so easy to just start word vomiting.
Oh yeah, very easy.
A highly effective way to structure your responses to avoid that is by using the point example result method, or PER for short.
I really like using this method.
It's a framework that keeps answers structured, clear, and very easy to follow.
It works exactly like it sounds. First, you make your point a clear, direct answer to the question.
Right?
Then, you give an example, a specific situation from your past that illustrates your point. Finally, you share the result, the outcome, or impact of your action.
I think of the PER method kind of like being a good tour guide. Your point tells the listener exactly where we're going.
Nice analogy.
The example is the scenery along the way that makes the trip interesting, and the result is the souvenir they get to take home, the definitive proof that the journey mattered.
That makes total sense.
Let's try a sample answer to see how this works in practice. Suppose the prompt is, why are you interested in AI training work?
All right, using the PER method, I start with the point. I might say, I'm interested in this work because I want to directly improve AI accuracy and reliability.
Great.
Then, moving to the example, I'd add, in my previous role, I spent 3 years reviewing and editing complex technical documentation to ensure it was factually correct and easy for everyday users to understand.
You've set the destination, you've shown us the scenery, now bring it home with the result.
I'd conclude with, as a result, I know how to carefully evaluate information, which ensures that the AI output I help train will be genuinely helpful, accurate, and safe for end users.
That structure is incredibly helpful. It prevents the answer from wandering off topic.
Yeah, it really does.
You state what you want to do, you prove you've done it before, and you explain why that matters right now.
Exactly.
But, the PER method sounds great in theory. When you're in the hot seat and your mind goes blank, it's much harder to execute. So let's put you in that hot seat.
Uh-oh. Okay, I'm ready. Let's do a mini role play.
Okay, I'm going to ask you 3 specific questions, and you answer each one using the point example result structure. We'll see how natural it can sound.
Sounds good.
Here is question 1. Tell me about your experience and why it fits this role.
My background in educational content design makes me a strong fit for evaluating complex information.
Okay.
For instance, I previously managed a project where I had to align hundreds of lesson plans with strict state standards, checking for both accuracy and readability.
Nice example.
Because of that experience, I am highly capable of reviewing AI responses to ensure they meet strict quality and factual guidelines today.
Okay, stepping out of character for a second. The reason that approach is so effective is that you didn't just recite your resume chronologically.
Right. Nobody wants to hear a timeline.
You actively translated your past. You took educational content design and explicitly bridged it to evaluating AI responses. You did the heavy lifting for the evaluator rather than hoping they'd make the connection themselves.
Exactly. You want to draw a straight line from your history to their current needs.
Let's try question 2. This one is a bit more situational. How would you decide which AI response is better?
I would make my decision by relying heavily on the provided project guidelines and the original user intent.
Got it.
For example, if I'm reviewing 2 explanations of a scientific concept, I would first check which one strictly follows the prompt's formatting rules, and then I would verify the facts using trusted sources.
Right, checking the rules first.
Ultimately, this logical process allows me to select the response that is not only factually found, but also the most helpful and safe for the user.
I noticed you leaned heavily on project guidelines there. My instinct, if I were nervous, would probably be to just pick the one that sounded smartest or most eloquent to me.
Yeah, a lot of people do that.
Why is relying on personal preference a trap in these evaluations?
That is a great question, and it's a trap a lot of people fall into. Relying on personal preference is dangerous because your idea of a good answer might completely violate the specific constraints the user asked for.
Ah, true.
If the user asks for a summary suitable for a 5th grader, and the AI generates a beautifully written, highly technical academic paper.
It's a terrible response for that specific prompt.
Exactly. By centering the guidelines and the user's intent, you show that you understand the fundamental goal of the work. You aren't just judging prose, you are assessing utility.
That makes total sense. You're shifting from being a critic to being an objective evaluator. All right, ready for the last one?
Bring it on.
What would you do if you are not sure about an answer?
If I encounter a topic I'm completely unsure about, always pause to research rather than guessing. In a past editing role, I was assigned a text on advanced networking protocols that I was totally unfamiliar with, so I consulted technical glossaries and cross-referenced the material with official documentation.
Solid example.
By taking that extra time to verify the facts, I ensure that my final evaluations are always accurate and dependable, even when I start out in unfamiliar territory.
What stands out to me there is how you handled a potential weakness. You pivoted from a lack of knowledge to a demonstration of resourcefulness.
Right.
You showed a logical process rather than just admitting defeat.
And that's usually what platforms are looking for. No one knows everything, but they need to know you won't just make things up when you're confused.
Now that we've seen what a successful approach looks like, I think we should contrast it. What are the common mistakes that candidates make? And more importantly, why are they so detrimental?
Let's do it.
Let's start with pacing. Speaking too fast.
Speaking too fast is incredibly common, usually driven by adrenaline.
Yeah, we've all been there.
But the mechanism behind why it's bad is simple. When you rush, you stumble over your words, and your clarity plummets. If your words are jumbled, the core signal of your expertise gets completely drowned out by the noise of your delivery.
Rambling is another huge issue that creates the same problem, right?
Absolutely. If you don't have a structure like the PER method, you may end up talking in circles. Evaluators are looking for targeted reasoning.
Yeah.
If you bury your core point in a 5-minute tangent about something completely unrelated to the prompt, you're actively hiding your own competence.
It's like hiding that souvenir in a giant pile of luggage. The evaluator shouldn't have to dig for it.
Exactly.
Another pitfall is being vague. Using phrases like, I've done a lot of work in this area, or I usually fix problems when I see them.
Ugh, yes.
That doesn't actually tell me anything about your capabilities. It just sounds like filler.
And, of course, not answering the direct question. You can give a beautifully structured PER answer, but if it doesn't actually address what was asked, it doesn't help you. Always make sure your point actually aligns with the prompt.
You also want to avoid ignoring the role requirements. If you're applying for a highly technical position, say a senior developer role, your examples need to reflect that technical depth. A generic example about fixing a typo won't cut it.
Definitely.
And finally, memorizing scripted answers.
Yes. Memorizing scripted answers can sound incredibly unnatural and robotic. You want to remain conversational and flexible.
Right?
If you sound like you are just reading off a screen, it completely undermines the impression of genuine, fluid problem solving.
There is one more common mistake I want to dig into because I think it's controversial. Some candidates think it's perfectly fine to just say, I don't know, when they are stumped, assuming honesty is the best policy.
Right, and they just leave it at that.
Let me push back on that for a second. If you really are stuck and you honestly do not know the answer to a highly specific domain question, why is just saying, I don't know, a bad approach? Isn't it better to just be upfront rather than trying to fake it?
Honesty is absolutely great, and you definitely shouldn't fake it. But a flat, I don't know, shuts down the conversation entirely.
Right, it's a dead end.
It leaves a complete dead end. Remember, the interview isn't a trivia test, it's a window into how you operate. Instead of a dead end, candidates can explain how they would go about finding the answer.
So outline the research process.
Exactly. You can say, I'm not familiar with that specific term off the top of my head, but here's the process I would use to research it.
Oh, that's smart.
You just say, I'd consult this specific database, verify the information against these types of primary sources, and cross-reference the output.
Wow, yeah.
That shows your problem-solving mechanics. It turns a moment of ignorance into a prime example of your analytical skills, which is often exactly what is being evaluated in the first place.
That makes so much sense. It shows that you aren't helpless when you hit a roadblock. Now, I know some of you listening might also be exploring other platforms right now.
Sure.
How does preparing for Zara on Aligner compare to preparing for something like Micro One?
It's a very helpful comparison to make because both platforms often require rigorous preparation. But the focus can be quite different.
How so?
Well, preparing for Micro One may focus slightly more on rapid technical problem solving. In those environments, you might need to be ready to write code from scratch or solve logic puzzles on the fly under a tight time constraint.
So it's execution heavy.
It's often very execution heavy.
Whereas Aligner preparation often emphasizes evaluating responses and domain reasoning. You're usually demonstrating how well you can assess information that's already there, catch subtle errors, and explain your rationale clearly.
Precisely. They both demand a high level of expertise, but they may lean on completely different cognitive muscles.
That's a good way to put it.
One is about building the solution from the ground up under pressure, and the other is often about methodically analyzing and correcting a provided solution. It's all about knowing what the specific platform generally values.
Which brings us to the final stretch, As we wrap up this discussion, we want to leave you with an actionable list.
Yes.
Consider this your final checklist to run through right before you click the start button for your interview.
Okay, step 1. Review your role requirements. Take 10 minutes to reread the job description. Make sure you clearly understand the specific skills expected for the position you applied for, so your examples hit the right notes.
Step 2. Prepare a brief self-introduction. You often need to give a quick overview of who you are and what you do. Have a comfortable, natural summary ready, and please keep it brief. They want to know your professional background, not your entire life story.
Step 3. Prepare 3 solid examples from your past experience. Think of scenarios where you solved a difficult problem, caught a subtle error, or had to navigate complex, ambiguous instructions.
Having those ready is a lifesaver.
Absolutely. Having these stored in your back pocket will make using the PER method so much easier when you're under pressure.
Step 4. Practice comparing AI responses out loud. You can even go to any public chatbot, generate a couple of texts or code blocks on your own, and talk to your empty room about why one is better than the other.
It feels silly, but it works.
It really does. Getting used to verbalizing your internal reasoning is incredibly helpful. It breaks that initial awkwardness.
Step 5. Actually use the point example, result framework we discussed. Remember to keep your answers structured, impactful, and easy to follow. Don't make the evaluator dig for your expertise.
Step 6. Test your microphone and camera. Technical issues can add a massive amount of unnecessary stress, and they can interrupt your flow. Make sure your equipment is working perfectly before you even begin the process.
And step 7. Speak clearly and at a natural pace. Take a breath, collect your thoughts, and do not feel the need to rush.
Yes.
Pausing for a second to formulate your point is always better than rushing into a rambling tangent.
The most important thing you can do is just be yourself and rely on your real expertise. You have the knowledge. This is simply your opportunity to share it.
Exactly. Trust the preparation you've put in.
Before you log on, remember this. You aren't just taking an interview. You are actively demonstrating the exact skills needed to train AI models. Your brain, your reasoning, and your specific domain expertise are the blueprints they are looking for. Treat the interview like your first day on the job. Good luck with your preparation, and remember that clear communication is your best tool.